Hey everybody, so one of the things that got requested recently was a breakdown of some touches with commentary and slow-mo. So we're just going to take one of the touches and take a look at kind of what's happening here. So it seems simple enough, it's a pair riposte, but there's a lot of stuff going on at the beginning there. So a lot of that is like footwork to kind of set stuff up. It's called preparatory footwork. One of the interesting things that you'll find in modern fencing literature is that most of the stuff that we practice in class or that's typically practiced in class is called a concluding action. So we will practice like the pair riposte in a typical kind of HEMA class or an old school sport fencing class. And that's only like a tiny percentage of actually what happens here in fencing. Most of it is like trying to gain distance, trying to gain an advantage, and they would call that like preparatory steps or recon, like doing some recon on the person. And that's actually like 99.9% of fencing. The concluding action is very small and very much at the end. So let's take a look at what happens here. In slow-mo, it looks like just a typical pair riposte, but kind of what I'm doing here is using like an old school Highland broadsword guard. So at the beginning, I'm using a medium guard because I don't really know where he's going. I'm kind of actively using my sword to feint, and that's actually a good thing. They say not to use a medium guard, but that it's necessary for all positions, and you basically start off in a medium guard outside a distance because you don't know where he's at. This is exactly the same as rapier finding the sword. So what I'm doing is exploring, moving around, and then you see as I get closer into distance and I found his sword, I know where his position is, I know which side he's on, you can see me turn my hand ever so slightly there into an outside guard. And basically what that does is it limits his targets. So he can still really attack me low if he wants to, that's fine. But the outside line where his sword is covered. He could try to force through there, and that's a valid attack, but it would take him lifting his hilt, which gives me a cue, right? But basically, he's kind of forced to attack the inside, which is where I want him. But he has to do so with a disengage. He can't just do it directly. He has to turn his hand over and attack to the other side, okay? So that's one of the things that's different about historical fencing, and you find this in a lot of different styles. So like Italian Sabre does it, especially the older stuff. French Sabre does it, rapier does it, smallsword does it, is you tend to cover the line properly there to force them to disengage to attack you. So he does that, and now I'm doing something called a beat parry, where I give it a little bit at the end of it. So I've turned my wrist, then I start pushing from the shoulder, and then at the end I give it a little finger squeeze. And what that does is it totally knocks his blade out of position, disorders his sword. So Thomas Page would call that a stopping parry. Godfrey talks about squeezing the fingers during the parries. And afterwards I can hit him safely, even though I don't have opposition on his sword, because his sword has been stopped. So it's a detached parry. It's no longer attached like an opposition parry. And I do so completely safely. I'm able to recover. My hilt is up. So those are kind of like everything that goes into that. It looks like a simple pair riposte. There's a lot that's involved in setting that up. Most of it is preparatory footwork that has nothing to do with the concluding action, and I don't have a plan. I'm just moving around, maybe seeing it, and then as I get in the distance, I take a proper guard, which draws out a reaction I want, and then with proper form, a little squeeze of the fingers, turn of the wrist, I can stop his blade, and I have a moment to hit him and a clear path to the head. So that's a touch breakdown.